Welcome, everybody, to the Healing Place podcast. This is your host, Teri Wellbrock, and just wanted to take a second to thank you for being here and a part of this healing space, for liking, sharing, commenting on videos, and yes, just helping this show continue to grow. Had our best month ever in October. So excited about that. Almost doubled September's downloads, which is just incredible. And the show's been on the air for over 4 years and 3 months. Started in July of 2017. And last month's downloads accounted for over 11% of total downloads over all of that time. So it just absolutely blossomed. And I have you to thank for it. So many people saying, hey, I was talking about the Healing Place podcast and told this friend to listen in, or hey, I have somebody who's experiencing some severe grief, and so yes, can you tell me what show they need to listen to? So it's just been wonderful, and I just wanted to say thank you. Again, a reminder to go to academy.teriwellbrock.com. Tell folks I have online courses and coaching available. Thanks. Now for the show. Welcome, everybody, to the Healing Place podcast. I am your host, Teri Wellbrock, and very excited to have with me today Beth Cavenaugh, and she is certified hospice and palliative care nurse and author of Some Light at the End. And yeah, we are going to talk about a subject we haven't talked about yet here on the Healing Place podcast. So I'm excited to learn from Beth, and welcome.
Thanks, Teri. I'm so happy to be here, and I hope I can provide some hope and healing during this interview.
Oh, I'm absolutely sure you can. And again, I told you before we hit record, my dad passed in 2009, and he was in a hospice, and like a building hospice. It wasn't in-home hospice, but he kept saying that he wanted to go home, but we never did have time to make the transition. But it was such a beautiful, beautiful experience for us as a family to be able to be there with him. And one of the things I read on I've read your website and your one sheet and all of that. One of the things you talk about is patients, those who have been given a terminal diagnosis, being allowed to make their choices because it's their journey. And I loved that. So can you talk to us about, the work you're doing?
Yeah, I do feel really strongly about what we call patient autonomy. So patients have the right to make decisions about their care, their life, their death, their health. And our job as nurses, as a hospice and palliative care nurse, is just to present patients with transparent information and the possibilities and consequences of what they choose or what they decide not to choose, and then just let the patient decide. You know, there's a lot of patients that don't want hospice for understandable reasons, and I never really understood that until I started having family conferences with patients and families about hospice. And I had so many patients say, nope, I am not ready yet. I don't want to throw in the towel. I want to keep going to the hospital if anything, happens. I don't want people coming in my home. And I just really felt like it's important to honor that choice and that decision. And if we present hospice information in a gentle way, maybe they'll circle back to it in a month or 2 months, or maybe in a year. I mean, you just never know. So I do feel like patient autonomy, at any time in life, is really important, people making their own decisions about their life. But also at the end of life, I think it's a beautiful opportunity to keep giving people control when a lot of their life is out of control.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I know that was exactly what happened with our family. Is my dad was in the hospital, and someone came in and talked to us about it, and he was very adamant that he did not want that he was going to go home, and he was going to make it home and be okay. And and my mom said, no, we're not going to go down that road. And just as time passed, it just became more evident to all of us. And I think families do need, and patients certainly need, time to process. And again, I just come back to, I love how you're saying, um, and I say it all the time for healing from trauma, which we talk about often on the show, is we're all on our own individual journeys. And so just honoring, you said the word honoring, and that's just so key, to honor where each person is along their journey.
I had one of my first kind of stories that I remember when I was a hospice nurse long ago at an AIDS hospice. I had a nurse mentor, and we were walking around, and she was telling me about we were walking into patients' rooms, and we walked into this one patient room, and he was watching soap operas and he was dying. And I said, why don't we, turn off the soap operas and maybe listen to Bach or something kind of spiritual and holy. And she said, Beth, this is his final chapter to write. It's not your chapter to write. And I thought, oh, wow. She goes, he loves soap operas. Like most of his life, he has watched this soap opera, General Hospital. It was really important to him. And it was such a great lesson for me. That was my first lesson. And I've had many lessons since then. And I continue to, that patients teach me about, honoring their life and their choices and what's important to them, because it will always be different from what I think is important.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I know, again, I keep coming back to my dad, only because it was such a great example. I remember looking at my dad and saying, Dad, if you could have anything in the world right now, what would you like? And he said, I'd like a Whopper Jr. from Burger King and to watch Christmas Vacation. And it was January, it was after Christmas. And so I said, all right. So I sent my oldest son, I said, go get Pawpaw a Whopper Jr. So he sat and fed it to him, which is such a great memory. And so he ate about half of it. And then there was a horrible ice storm. I lived in Cincinnati at the time. And the rest of the family left, and I stayed with my dad, and we watched American Idol. But it was the beginning of American Idol where we did watch Christmas Vacation. We watched that, and he laughed, and he kept coming in and out of consciousness, but he would laugh, and then he would quote things, and I was loving it. But so I turned on American Idol just to sit with him because he'd fallen asleep. And it was that American Idol when they used to show like the horrible outtakes when people sang horribly at the beginning. And at one point he opened his eyes and he was like, oh, and I was like, I realized the speaker like in his hospital bed was like right in his ear. And I was like, oh my gosh, Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
And those are good memories, right? I mean,
it is.
That's a beautiful memory. And the whole, like the fact that he wanted a Whopper and he wanted to watch Christmas Vacation, and that your son could go get Papa the Whopper and feed it to him. I mean, those are incredible memories for your son, for you, and to give your dad that kind of control at the end of his life. And those simple things are still so important. And it feels so good to be able to offer, choices to people at the end of life. So that's really beautiful that you asked him that really important question, what's really important to you right now?
Yeah. Well, thanks. And I whatever inspired me to do so, no one had instructed us. I just was kind of like just watching him lay there. And I thought, he really needs something that's going to make him smile and make him happy. And so that was it.
My guess is you get your instruction from
higher
sources.
I was going to say a little angel tap or something on my shoulder.
Right. I
have a fabulous story about that, and then I promise I will let you talk.
No, this is great. I love dialogue. This is so good.
I know. I feel like I'm like blah, blah, blah. But so my mom, speaking of faith, my mom would pray every day. My dad was a Jesuit brother. We very Catholic, and my mom's very Catholic, goes to daily mass and prays her rosary, and so she had been praying ever since my dad had died. Jim, if you could just give me a sign that you went peacefully. She was so concerned that he struggled and just wanted to know that he died peacefully. And because he died within a few hours after I left him that night. He passed that night, like within about 5 hours. And so anyway, she was working at a little deli at a Kroger store, a grocery store, and she said, and I was at this podium, and I would take people's orders for their lunch meat and cheeses and whatever. And she said, and I looked up and she said, I said to myself, oh, that looks like the Holy Spirit walking towards me. And then she said, it was a lady in a red skirt and a red jacket with almost a glowing white shirt, but she had like a red round pillbox hat on her head like Jackie Kennedy used to wear in the 60s.
Wow. Or a halo.
Yeah, I mean, right. Well, this story is so crazy. So she says, the lady walks up to her and says, "Hi, did you have a husband that passed in hospice earlier in the year?" Now, this was in the summertime, and my dad had died in January. And she said, my mom said, "Yes." She said, "Well, I was his hospice nurse, and I just wanted to let you know that he died peacefully." And so my mom was so blown away. Like, she was like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much." So the lady left. My mom got home and she said, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I forgot to ask, like, what were his last words? What was her name so I could thank her, blah, blah, blah." So she started praying on it again. And she said, like, I don't know, a couple weeks later, she was standing there. The same woman walked in the exact same outfit, walked up to the podium and said, "Hi, yes, I wanted to come back and answer a few questions for you. And I
No.
wanted to tell you that when I walked into the room to check on Jim, I said, 'Do you need anything?' And he said, 'Yes, will you pray the Memorare with me?'" Which was his favorite prayer. So she did. And then she said, "Jim, you look cold. Would you like a heated blanket?" And he said, "That would be wonderful." And she said, and I left the room, and when I came back, he was gone. So he died peacefully.
Wow.
So my mom was like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Can I ask your name?" And so the lady gave her name. So my mom got home that evening and called Hospice of Cincinnati and said, "I just wanted to say how much it meant for me for the nurse that took care of my husband in January to stop by. Please tell," and then said her name. And they said, "We don't have anybody here that works here by that name and never has."
Whoa.
And so my mom says, "I swear it was an angel." And I said, "Oh my gosh, for sure." Like, I get
Definitely.
goosebumps every time I tell it.
I love that story. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So
Wow.
anyway, now I'll let you talk. So
That's incredible. I mean, I've had a lot of experiences with patients who, as they're transitioning towards actively dying, they call it the veil being very thin at this stage. So they're kind of like, I mean, we see it as kind of crossing back and forth between this earth, physical earth, and then what's to come, the mystery. And you can really see it as somebody who's at the bedside a lot, where it doesn't happen to everybody, but they either have conversations with people who have gone before them. Maybe their husband was deceased and they're having a conversation with their husband, or Auntie Anne is sitting right next to her in the chair. Jesus has been in the room with one of my patients, and so I kind of feel like all bets are off when it comes to this stuff. I mean, that's one of the reasons I find it really amazing and such an honor to work in this field of end of life, because it is such a sacred time and divine, and there's so much mystery around it. And I love that piece of it. So I love that your mother had this. I mean, she reminds me of like a Pan Am flight attendant.
yes. Yeah. That was it. That's what I had envisioned as well. Yes.
Right. Pan Am angel who came to her to, relieve her from her distress. And I think a lot of people do have distress after somebody who has died, and all the what ifs and what happened and how were they. So I find that beautiful that your mom had that experience.
Yes. Well, my dad had high anxiety, and I'm only looking out the window because a hawk has landed right outside my window, a giant hawk. That is the craziest thing I have ever seen.
Oh,
here.
okay.
So I don't know what that means, but anyway, so I'm just letting you know that that's really crazy. I know, and so it's just distracting me. So I'm going to try not to. But what were we talking about?
Hawks. Let's go there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, isn't that crazy? What's the symbolism for hawks, that you see things clearly as? Yeah. Anyway, so what we're talking about, we're seeing it clearly. So yeah, so let's turn towards the book and talk about what this book is about, what inspired it, and so forth.
So I'm a hospice nurse, and what inspired it was a lot of things. But mostly all the education that we do for patients and families. Unlike your dad, a lot of hospice patients go home and their family or friends take care of them. That's a lot of them. Unless somebody's already living in a nursing home or a foster home, then hospice will come to them there. We visit people wherever they live. And, you know, people want to know about hospice. They want to know what happens if I don't choose hospice. There's information in there about how a patient dies, how they decline over time, what that looks like. There's information about a lot of the symptoms that we address, like constipation, anxiety, pain, shortness of breath. And there's information about care for somebody at the end of life. And I actually wrote this to a hospice patient because I feel like they're the star of the show, and I really wanted to highlight them, and knowing that they could read this if they wanted to, and they could make choices about the end of their life if they wanted to. But I thought about the caregiver every step of the way because they're the ones who often have all the questions and they're doing the 24/7 care. So I really wanted them to have a resource that's accessible and digestible and easy to understand, and they can, just refer to it at 3 a.m. I also had my own experience with hospice, which is one of the other pieces to my reason for writing the book. And I took care of my mom in 1998 when she died of lung cancer. And I had so many questions when I was taking care of her. And it was really a surprise every step of the way. And I wish that I would have had some information to draw on. I could have called the hospice team, and they are available 24/7 by phone, but it didn't really occur to me at the time. And a lot of things you just kind of want to think ahead. And yeah, a lot of it is just information I wish I would have had as somebody who's taking care of my own mom. Yeah, so I really wrote it just to be a resource for people to have at the end of their life, one that's kind of a soft landing place for hospice, because death and dying is a really hard subject for most people. So
yeah, well, what a beautiful, beautiful gift to give to, well, again, to patients who, I can only imagine the anxiety that people face when giving that sort of diagnosis. Yeah, as a person who's experienced anxiety, like I know my anxiety would just be, through the roof.
yeah.
But what a gift I don't know, just to have that anchor, something to hold on to and hope, is just such a gift to give to folks.
Mm-hmm. I do think it can provide people relief, at the end of life. When I think about my mom after she died, and my sister and I just kind of instinctively put her in some sweet pajamas before she left our house. And now I really advocate for people doing rituals at the end of life and really thinking about that, really thinking about the moment of death. If you happen to be there at the time, what you want to do for your mom, or maybe even they can provide you with some information about what would be important to them. I talk about dismantling the machinery and maybe put them in a gown or put a blanket over them, and really have a moment of honor, because death is such a feared concept in our culture. And I really want it just to bring it back as a really beautiful moment of pause, sacredness, honor, because that can provide a lot of healing for the people who are left behind too, just knowing that they did something like that.
Yes. Well, again, from stories that I've heard of friends and family who have gone through it and have been offered that kind of, I don't know, just that time that, again, it's just such a gift. I know when we had time with my dad, just to be able to kiss him on the forehead. And I wrote a short story about it in the moment, because it was just, again, just such a beautiful way to say goodbye to him. And to be allowed that space with him. Yeah.
I'm so glad you wrote about it, because that's one thing that you're not really thinking about when you're taking care of somebody that you love, is that, part of it's just that you don't believe they're going to die, but you also forget so much that happens at that really beautiful, poignant time. And I love that you wrote about it. And then that's your gift that you can pass on to other people, right? Is to remind them to be with their loved one at the end of their life and say a deliberate goodbye if that feels right to them. So I love that you had that experience and that you wrote about it.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I really think when I read it now, like I get choked up, not about my own goodbye and my own, which was so much a part of it, but it was my youngest son, the one who's that one. um, he he was young. He was younger. I think he was 15 when my dad passed. And so, and it was the image of him sitting on a couch over by the window, like he was trying to get as far away. He was at the furthest point in the room away from my dad, and so it was kind of like his journey as well, and it just pointed to how each of us and each family member, which I'm sure you deal with,
Right.
everyone again honoring where each person present is along their journey with it.
Right. And I think a lot of people have different comfort levels with death and dying, right? And of course, a 15-year-old, your son has probably never been in the room with somebody who is dying. So it feels scary, but I also feel like it's kind of an amazing opportunity for kids to also just, have that moment. My guess is if he didn't want to be there, he probably wouldn't have been there. There's a lot of, I always say, give choices to people too. So give choices to them, whether or not they want to be in the room, whether they want to be outside of the room. I mean, I've had lots of families just sit outside of the room and that's where they'd rather be because they're not comfortable with it. And kids, especially, they sometimes just don't even know what they would want. So I think it's just important to honor that. So I like that he chose the back seat.
Yes, right.
It was still there.
I'm going to watch this from way out here, right?
Right. But still be in there,
Yeah.
Is he the one who brought the Whopper?
No, that was the older one. So that was, I got to interrupt this one. So yeah, he was 17. And so, yeah, he had been really, really super close with my dad. So I think that was just a bonding moment. And I think it was very healing for John as well. To have that time with his pawpaw. Yeah.
Yeah. I do think it's important to, like I said, give choices, especially to children, about what they want and give them ideas for ways to engage because they don't know. So I think, maybe feeding your mom ice cream or Jello or, just reading to them or drawing them a picture of something that's important to you and telling them about it or, feeding him a Whopper. Like,
right. Well, I love it. Yeah. And some of the things that I've read that you wrote, how it was, go for that Sunday. I mean, if you're in hospice, go eat the Sunday.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. We had this CNA that I worked with. His name is Boyd. I hope he doesn't mind me sharing his name. But he would always make Sundays for all of our patients all the time. Everybody requested his Sundays and it would be, he was an evening shifter. So from 3 to midnight, he was busy making Sundays for all these people. And, he always remembered what's the most important thing is asking the patients, what they want a delicious taste of. So I think I do think it's important to, a lot of patients who have cardiac issues or diabetes, they've been on this rigid diet forever. And I know there's some health consequences, so I'm not advocating definitely. Always check with your medical professional. But at the end of life, it's nice to be able to throw some of those rules and regulations away and kind of let them be a little freer.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I understand. Well, I get what you're saying about check with the doctor, but it does seem like I want the Sunday. I want the Whopper Junior.
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Beautiful. All right. So is there anything else that you wanted to steer towards and talk about?
Let's see. Well, I think that, I just like to encourage people that if they know somebody who has a terminal diagnosis or is on hospice, to show up in some way for them. Usually families need extra help and extra support. It's kind of an intense time. So I think that offering meals, offering just moments that you can sit with the patient so that the primary caregiver can take a rest or go get their hair done or run an errand. I encourage people to show up. It's a really beautiful time in someone's life. And I think the more that we do that, the more experiences that we have with death, it just becomes this amazing cultural norm that's not feared. And then we can create other meaningful ways to die, meaning like maybe insurance will pay for somebody to die in the hospital, and we can have these amazing death suites, like we do birth suites, and maybe insurance plans will cover that. And, and there will be hospice homes sprinkled throughout the country. So I always have these kind of visions and dreams about other possibilities for hospice in our country. And I think just the more people who engage with death and dying can see what a beautiful experience it can be, and that it's not as scary necessarily. And it's just a beautiful way to connect with people.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that so many people, and the more and more, well, again, just doing these interviews and people that I talk to are using the words transition. Because it really is. I mean, for those of us, I think for many people, it's just a transition of spirit from this life to another realm, another dimension, another place. And yeah, so I just think if we, by honoring, I love your ideas. I mean, they're just beautiful ways to honor that transition.
I mean, after my mom died, I feel like I developed a spiritual relationship with her, and I don't know if you have that with your dad also. Yeah. I mean, it's just an incredible way to still connect with your loved ones. I mean, whatever that looks like for people, but I do feel like it's not necessarily over after we die.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can say with absolute certainty because my dad gives me messages. So many of my friends, I don't know if I'm just drawn to them, have I don't know, intuitive abilities, psychic abilities, whatever, however you want to label it. And I was sitting at a brewery having a beer with a friend, and all of a sudden she said, "Oh my gosh, your dad is behind you," which made me dumb because my dad was, and I was like, looking over my shoulder, like, "What?" And she said, "Oh yeah," she said, "He's wearing like a," now she had never met my dad. And so she's like, "He's wearing like a flat, like Andy Cap kind of hat, and he's doing a funny little dance." And I just started cracking up laughing because my dad loved this tan flat hat that he had. He wore it everywhere all the time. And he always did. He imitated my grandma Kitty and did what he called the Irish jig. And he was 6'6", a big guy, but he would like do this silly little dance. And he was imitating it. And I was like, in a million years, if she had stalked my Facebook page, I had never put anything out there about that.
Right.
Like, there's no way she could have known either of those things.
I love that. Yeah. I love that.
And then there's many more stories of things where people will reach out and tell me, "Hey, your dad told me blah, blah, blah." And I'll be like, "Oh my gosh, thanks, Dad."
Oh my gosh, you're so lucky, actually. What gifts,
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, and one question I did have, so now, do the majority of people want to be at home when they do hospice? Is there data on who wants to be in a facility versus who wants to be at home?
They say that there's one statistic I've seen recently, and I'm not very good with stats, and it could have changed, is that 80% of patients want to be in their home when they die. But I also think, a lot of people don't know the realities of death and dying and the realities of what care at home will look like. There's a lot of men and women that live alone, and so they don't actually have anybody to take care of them. And we have the silver tsunami, which is, all of our baby boomers aging, and there will be plenty of people that live alone or live with their partner who will be 85 years old also and having to do the care. So 80% of the patients do want to live at home while they die, but I just feel like it's a unrealistic goal to shoot for, because a lot of patients need more care than either their loved ones can provide or than is reasonable and beautiful. And then also, that's why I so want other hospice homes, and I want insurance companies to pay for end-of-life care in various places. I want Medicare to be able to cover room and board if somebody is in a nursing home, and in addition to hospice, because I think that patients just need more care than they think they do. And for the caregivers, it's kind of nice, your dad died in a home, so you could show up and be his daughter and love him and not think about, bathing him, and not think about taking him to the toilet or giving him his medications or managing his pain if his pain is kind of out of control. So I see a lot of patients at home who feel a little overwhelmed by all the medical knowledge they have to gain and all of the responsibility. I mean, I felt very responsible for my mom's comfort. She had shortness of breath. That was her main symptom. And it was stressful to be the one who was kind of managing her morphine and making sure she was comfortable and managing her oxygen concentrator. So yes, patients do want to die in their home, but I think it's not always realistic or practical.
Yeah, that's just such a beautiful, valid point you brought up, and I never really thought about that before, is that I was able to come and go from that hospice center, just being a daughter and not, I mean, obviously trying to make sure my dad's needs were being met, and doing all I could to make him smile and be comfortable. But yeah, I didn't have to worry about those things. Yeah.
Right. And we have a couple hospice homes here in Oregon, and I work in a hospice home now, and I love it because, I see the patients and the families come in, and the families are just relieved, that they can just now kind of sit back and hold their mom's hand and be with her and read her poetry and feed her ice cream and not worry about anything else. So yeah, it's one of my hopes.
Yes. Yeah. Well, again, I mean, I feel it was such a gift, to be able to have that time with my dad. And I'll finish us up on a funny note, because, and I may have talked about this once before on the show, but so I said I was the last one to leave with my dad, and American Idol ended. And I gave my dad a kiss on the head, and I said, "All right, Dad, I'll see you tomorrow. It's a really bad ice storm right now. I'm going to go ahead and take off. But I love you." And, he didn't respond. He was asleep, or he was in and out of consciousness. So I went to leave the room quietly. And when I did, I tripped over his catheter cord. And all of a sudden, this is the last thing my dad saw of my face. "Dad, I am so sorry."
Oh my gosh.
Because he sat up and went, "Oh," and I was like, "Oh my gosh, Dad, I'm so sorry." Well, then I couldn't find a nurse. I couldn't find anybody because it was late, and they were in other people's rooms, and I certainly didn't want to knock on somebody's door and be like, "Hey, sorry to interrupt."
That's so funny.
So I called, left a message when I got home, but he died within a few hours. But I know he's laughing about it now. Funny. But at the time, I was like, "Oh my gosh!" I pulled his catheter cord out.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you gave him one good last look at your face. So
I did.
That's good. That's what he wanted.
I figured he needed to see me with that look of horror on my face. Ah!
That's so cute. Oh my gosh.
I can hear him laughing, so I know he's laughing. So yeah. So how do people connect with you? How do they find you?
They can find my book on my website, which is bethcavenaugh.com, and you can connect with me there too. There's a little spot. You can just write me a message. So I think that's easy. I also have Facebook, and I have LinkedIn. So
awesome. And Cavenaugh is Cavenaugh.
That's correct. Yeah.
All right. just for those on audio, so they
Right.
know to put that E in there for Cavanaugh. All right.
Is our hawk still here?
No, it took off
Okay.
because I was going to turn the camera around if he was still out there. That was so crazy. Like, I have a planter sitting out there, and it was sitting on the planter, but it was like trying to dig under the planter. So I don't know if we're in South Carolina, so I don't know if there was a little gecko running around. It was trying to get it.
Right. I love that.
Crazy. So.
Thanks so much for having me today on your show, Teri, and thanks for all the good work that you're doing out there.
Oh my
I love
gosh.
your podcast.
Yeah, it's been such a gift for you to be here. And again, thank you for the work you're doing, because I know for me, it touched me personally. I mean, not you directly, but just the work you're doing. Oh my gosh. Again, I can just keep saying it's just such a gift that you give to people, to patients, to families. So my heart hugs yours.
Oh, thanks. I felt that. Well, I feel really lucky to do this work. So thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us on the Healing Place podcast. And remember, until next time, be gentle with yourself. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, everybody. Teri Wellbrock again. Just wanted to thank you for listening to the episode today and remind you to visit my website as well as the academy.teriwellbrock.com for the courses. But if you go to my website, teriwellbrock.com, you can sign up for my monthly Hope for Healing newsletter, which is also jam-packed with information and strategies and blog pieces and guest blog pieces and links to shows. And just a great space for, again, healing and hope strategies. Thanks for, again, being here and being a part of this healing space. I very much appreciate you. All right. Bye-bye.